Alright, so this is Jeep Update 40, and 40 is going to be the removal of all the old wiring. So I have read the Painless wiring instruction manual to the point where I'm feeling a little bit more confident with it, to be honest with you. Couple of different reminders in the instructions and on the paperwork that you get with the Painless wiring kit to read the instruction manual thoroughly before you begin. So I took that advice. I had a lot of prep work to do to get my Jeep ready for the removal of the wiring, and I've read through it enough times to where I feel comfortable. I also ended up recognizing that I needed some an additional set of crimpers, and then I also ordered the ground strap kit. Haven't got that in yet. It comes in tomorrow, and I'll show that to you guys when I get it. But it spends a couple pages in the book on the importance of grounds. And I can't say that I fully understood that in its entirety. And after reading this section in the book, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna order this kit and I'm gonna make sure my Jeep is grounded really well. So one of the other things that I did was I took all the wires that they give you are kind of broken into sections and they're wire tied together. And I took all the wire ties off, which they actually recommend to do, spread the wires out and start looking at each wire. Now I've had my dash off before, so I kind of recognize some of the fittings, wiper switch, the blower motor, all the connections that go to the speedometer and the voltmeter. So I'm like, okay, this looks a little bit more familiar, but what I learned by doing this is that there is not a single wire in this kit that is not labeled and tells you at least what it goes to, and then the instruction manual kind of corresponds with the order that they want you to install the kit in. So having done that, again, I think reading the manual, taking these the coiled up wires and spreading them out and really kind of looking at each wire and what it goes to really has given me a confidence boost to an otherwise kind of intimidating project, at least for me. So I'm going to kind of break these videos up. The first video is going to be the removal of the old wiring. Second video is going to be the installation of the, I guess, under dash wiring and the fuse block that goes inside the Jeep. The third video will focus on the engine compartment and the fuse block that mounts to the, where the two fuse blocks join together. And then the third video will be the wiring that goes into the back of the Jeep for essentially just the rear tail lights. So the order of the installation that I just described follows along with the book, and the book walks you through, like I said, every wire. And hey, if you don't have a clock, for example, or under dash lighting, you don't need this wire. Wrap it up, get it out of the way, or I guess you could cut it off, but I probably won't do that. I'll probably just wrap it and get it out of the way. So I'm ready to get into this. I'm kind of tired of talking about it. I'm excited to get into it. It's still a little nerve-wracking to rip out all the wiring, but let's go for it and let's have some fun. All right, so just for safety, I went ahead and just took the battery out and kind of got it out of the way. All right, now that the battery's out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and take the steering wheel off, the turn signal, and then I'm going to go ahead and take this dash off. And it says in the instructions as you take the old wiring off the dash to go ahead and wrap it up and label it, because you may need to reuse some of the fittings. It doesn't look like you need to, but I think it's a smart idea to do that. It might take a little bit longer, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap these things up and label them as I remove them. All right, so with the dash off, it really exposes a lot of these wires, and you've kind of almost, at that point when you have the dash off, you've pretty much taken off most of the wires that you need to disconnect. So under the dash, there's actually kind of two main harnesses that I see. One is this thing that sits here, and I'm not entirely sure what that is. I believe that's some early emissions controls. And you got a clump of wires there. that go behind the heater box, and hopefully I didn't pinch those off. They feel pretty tight, and I can get them out. This box was kind of a pain to get out. There's one screw right here, and I undid that one screw after kind of fiddling with this bracket. And once I undid the screw that was in here, the whole thing kind of just fell out. So I know where these wires go. They go right here in the engine compartment, and they connect to this thing. So I'm just going to have to trace these wires and figure it out. So on this side of the dash, you've got this is kind of the main harness here, and this is the old fuse block. In order to get the fuse block out, you've got to start on the engine side and unscrew that bolt. I believe that was a 3/8, and it stays in there, and that will release this side of the fuse block. And then this side of the fuse block is connected here and here with these Torx 25. So this is a Torx 25, and of course it's not, something normal like a Phillips head or a bolt head. It's got to be a Torx head. But if you own a Jeep like this, I'm quite certain you've got a set of Torx bits. So one clump of wires that I'm still trying to figure out what they are these up here, and I don't really know. I kind of messed with this a little bit last night, but I haven't seen how to get this unconnected. Not really sure what that is or what it goes to. It looks like part of the maybe the neutral safety switch, or maybe the connection for the brake light switch. I'm not sure, but I got to figure that out. And then all these wires should just push through this opening here. I may have to cut these just to get this main harness out, but I'm going to mess with it a little bit more today. All right, so I know it looks pretty messy and kind of intimidating with all the wires, but I don't think it's going to be that bad. I'm not sure why I'm feeling that confident, but I really don't think it's going to be that bad. I just got to figure out what that little patch of wires is above the steering column, and because I'm replacing my steering column, I may go ahead and drop this thing down so I can see that clump of wires up there a little bit better, and maybe I can get in there and unplug that harness or that connector. All right, so one more thing is this is the connection to the floor-mounted dimmer switch, and I've already replaced mine because I lost my headlights when I had it Line-X'd, and the dimmer switch that was in there was so old that it essentially just fell apart. So I got a new one, but if you haven't gotten a new one, highly recommend while you're doing this that you replace that switch, because your headlight, the operation of your headlights goes through that dimmer switch, and a lot of people don't know that. So always make sure you check that, replace it if you need to. It's not an expensive part, and I went ahead and replaced mine. All right, I'm going to keep working on this thing and see if I can get that steering column dropped down a little bit, figure out what that is, that switch is up there, and get this mess of wires out of here. All right, so in order to get that piece off the top of the steering column, I had to take a couple of those pieces off, and I was finally able to get to it. So there's two screws, one right there and one there, and it mounts on your steering column like that, but obviously underneath this bracket. So with those pieces of the steering column mount out, I got a little bit of play in the steering column here, and I was able to get to this and get it out. And figuring it out and what it is not a mystery anymore, because this is the ignition switch. And the reason I know it's the ignition switch is because I read the instruction manual for the painless wiring, and it talked about a black and white connector going on in a certain order. And I noticed on this thing the wires that fed into it right here were pretty thick gauge, so carrying some current. So I just figured out that that's the ignition switch. So this thing is definitely original, and I'm going to look for a replacement. I might have a replacement in my new steering column kit. I'm not sure, so I'm going to dig around, and if I don't, I'll go ahead and order one. So all the wiring under the dash is out, except for that clump of wires there, and I still got to figure out where that goes to, and if I might have to loosen up my heater, or even take my heater out to free up those wires. These wires that you still see here are the wires that go to my electric fans, and then wires that go to my stereo, which I've left in place. All right, so I figured out this thing here and how to get this out. These wires looked like in my Jeep they were going back here. They were just a little bit stuck behind my heater core. And if you looked through there, you can actually see the light and it comes through. I had to cut these because that rubber grommet out there was giving me a fit. But from the firewall side, it comes out right here. And that's the little rubber grommet. That was a pain in the rear. The bolts were kind of embedded into that rubber and I couldn't get them to turn, but I finally got them out, pulled that out, and it did not want to let go of it. So I don't know if I'm going to reuse this or have to try to find another part. I certainly don't want a big hole like that in my firewall. All right, so that's what the engine looks like with all of the wiring out of it. I actually took out the transmission, or I'm sorry, the radiator overflow and the windshield washer and the little reservoir for that because I never used that. So I'm going to leave that out. There's where the wiring harness was. All right, so here's all the wires, all the old wires. That's the interior harness. And that's kind of a combination of the engine and rear harness. All right, so that's the end of this segment of the painless wiring installation. So this was really just the removal of all the old wiring. And honestly, it went pretty smooth. I didn't really have any issues with it. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. So I got a clump of wiring there. I'm gonna order a new ignition switch and probably some of those like wire harness clips that go into the body of the Jeep. So one thing I was going to wait to do, and I don't really know why, I just wanted to kind of get everything wired up with the existing systems, an existing engine, existing steering column. But one of the things I think I'm going to do is go ahead and swap out my steering column. I've got the thing already unbolted, and the only bolts that are holding it on are the ones right up against the firewall, and then of course the the connector at the steering shaft. So I think I'm going to swap that out and go ahead and kind of force myself to wire it up to do the wiring with the new steering column. So one other thing about the when you take off the rear wiring for the Jeep, the wire is loomed and it goes it runs up above your gas tank. I was not going to drop my gas tank for those wires, so I ended up cutting them a little bit, and I ended up pulling really hard, and I got the wires out, but the loom's still up there, and I'm fine with that. I'm not going to drop the gas tank just to get the wire looms out, and then to run the new ones in. The new ones I'll just put in, and I'll have to just keep them up off the gas tank and put new. There's two places that you have connectors, and then there's two under the gas tank, and I just won't do the two under the gas tank. All right, a little bit more cleanup work to do, and I'll be ready to start the installation of the new wiring harness. And so far so good, and it's kind of been fun to get out here and work on the Jeep, and I'm really looking forward to putting this new harness in. All right, stay tuned to the channel for more videos coming up on the installation of the wiring harness. So if you like this video, you like the content of the channel, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.